بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وأفضل الصلوات وأتم التسليمات على النبي رحمة للعالمين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. أما بعد. All praises and gratitude are due to Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the creator, nourisher and cherisher of this universe. Peace, blessings and salutations be upon our beloved master and leader, Rasulullah Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Alhamdulillah that we are in the month of Ramadan. Ramadanukum Mubarak. May each and every person enjoy a blessed Ramadan. Barakah and blessing. And may we read from the promises of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the beautiful virtues that were shared to this ummah of Islam. This ummah of Islam is a very fortunate ummah that our sacrifice is very minimal, but the rewards are maximum. Previous nations had to make a little bit more effort. Their nature was such as well, so you can't blame. There's no injustice on the system. Their nature was a little bit more hard and tough, so they had to work a little harder for their rewards. This ummah, closer to Qiyamah, the ummah of Islam, is a softer nature, soft in nature. Since hence Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made it easy upon this ummah. We came the last and to Jannah first. We do one night of ibadah in Ramadan, Laylatul Qadr, equivalent to 1,000 months, plus minus 83 years. So when the previous nations came and they worshipped Allah for hundreds of years, Allah says, I give you one night which is equivalent to 83 years, plus minus 1,000 months. So our activity is very little, but our reward is maximum. And during the course of the night's tafsir after Taraweeh, we have been sharing and we will continue sharing some of the virtues of this beautiful month of Ramadan. For today in this afternoon, inshallah, we want to look at what are we trying to achieve by way of fasting by this month of Ramadan. What are we trying to achieve? This system of year in, year out, physically putting ourselves and our bodies through a system of deprivation, sleep deprivation, food and drink deprivation, lust and desires. So we are constantly putting our physical body through this system. So what are we trying to achieve by this physical ibadah? So fasting has two components. One is the physical side of it. That is what we just said now. The person will go through that motion of abstaining from intake from the rise of dawn, Tulu'ul Fajr, until sunset. And then again later on in the night, standing additional hour and a half in salah and in an act of ibadah for the sake of Allah. What are we really trying to achieve? There has to be some benefit and some outcome through a motion of such a sort. And it would be naive and negligent on our part that we just go through the motions of Ramadan, fast and do etc. these a'mal and ibadat, and we lose out on the values that Ramadan is trying to teach us. What are the values that Ramadan is trying to teach us? This ummah should be an ummah that has values. So we want to look at some of that. The first is, and this is it's in no specific order of preference. But perhaps in our day and age, I will give it this level of, or this order and sequence. So the first is purification of the tongue. Purification of the tongue. We know that today, vulgarity, shatm, loose language, vile language, swear words, the F's and the B's, and calling people names, and calling people derogatory terminologies, and making condescending remarks, naming people, belittling people, emotionally abusing our siblings and our children and our friends by this very tongue that Allah gave us for dhikr. Allahumma ja'alni laka dhakkara. Oh Allah, make me not just a normal dhakir. Allah, make me one who is excessively in your dhikr. This tongue Allah gave us for dhikr. And we have put this tongue in the system of abusing the next human being. So we learn this from the month of Ramadan. How do we learn it? It naturally, and we all experience this. If a person is going through a moment of retaliation or a moment of anger, and you are about to say something or do something, immediately you say, I am fasting. So that fast itself, which was physically depriving you of food, etc., but it's also providing a constant reminder throughout the day. Hey brother, I'm fasting. Hey brother, it's Ramadan. So we are constantly reminding ourselves. Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam, so why is this so important? Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, وَهَلْ يَكُبُّ النَّاسُ فِي النَّارِ إِلَّا عَلَى وُجُوهِهِمْ أَوْ عَلَى مَنَاخِرِهِمْ إِلَّا حَصَائِدُ أَلْسِنَتِهِمْ أو كما قال عليه السلام. That mankind will be flung and pushed into the fire through their head face first, being dragged, and by the hasaid, by the harvest, and by the fruits of what the tongue has prepared for it in the akhirah. So what we say with our tongue is going to be as a result of or the result of our akhirah is as a result of what we do with our tongues. And mankind will be pushed and thrown into the fire because of the actions and the words and the statements of this tongue. Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah said, and he had it engraved on his ring, جِرْمُهُ صَغِيرٌ وَجُرْمُهُ كَبِيرٌ. The size is very small, the crime is very major of this tongue. Just listen, pay attention, speak less, listen to people when they talk. If we are outside of the masjid, the minute we're in the masjid, everybody becomes pious. And when we are with our friends, then we want to act as if we are pious. So say, Astaghfirullah, la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah, hada haram wa hada kada. But anywhere else, listen, and you'll see how people's tongues are vile. People's tongues are loose. Just making remarks and swearing at each other. Or for nothing. You got hurt, you're walking on the way, and you knocked your foot. Instead of saying Inna Lillah, we have a swear word coming out from our tongues. So I said I put it first, to give it that level of importance. It's a day of social media, it's a day of internet, and let's not bluff ourselves. When we say that most people would have known and would have seen the outcome of the latest, Hollywood fiasco. On that stage, seeking that level of fame and name. But this one act of the tongue has brought that person to the lowest of the low. Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam said, hadith of Muslim, as a Sahaba, atadruna man al-muflis? Do you know who is an insolvent person? Bankrupt person? They said, Ya Rasulullah, the person who comes on the day of Qiyamah and is la dirham lahu wa la mal, the person who has no dirham, no mal. What we would think naturally, that was not a wrong answer. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said that maybe the muflis in the worldly terminologies, bankrupt person in the worldly terminologies, but a real bankrupt person in man, or muflis, insolvent person, is that person who comes on the day of Qiyamah, is presented by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and shatama hada wa he swore at so and so, he backbited so and so, he carried the tales of so and so, he lied to so and so, X, Y and Z, naming all the sins and listing all the sins of the tongue. Now the time of payment is to come. So the two will be brought forward, the verbal abuser and the one who was abused. And you will have to pay with your hasanat. يُعْطَى هَذَا مِنْ حَسَنَاتِهِ. You will pay with your hasanat, because on that day there is no currency of the world to avail us. When your hasanat will be finished, now the account is still outstanding. You will have to now carry the sayyi'at of the abused person who you verbally abused to your account. And that person is a muflis, having accumulated so many years of fasting in our books of deeds, having accumulated so many years of salah, having accumulated so many years of dhikr, having accumulated so many years of Quran, having accumulated so many years of feeding the fasting persons and making efforts around the feeding system, and having doing so much of goodness. And now you come in the akhirah, because of your vile, ugly tongue, you have to pay with your hasanat, with your good deeds, until the account is over. The payment is not over and your account is finished. Now you must take the burdens of the next person. Hence Rasulullah ﷺ said that Saum is not just from akal and shurb. Fasting is not abstinence from eating and drinking. That is a physical process. But إِنَّمَا الصَّوْمُ مِنَ اللَّغْوِ وَالرَّفَثِ. Saum, the real fasting is from that which comes out from our tongues. The vile and the ugliness that comes from our tongue. I get extremely annoyed when I hear vulgarity around me. And when I hear these nasty statements, derogatory remarks being said about one another. And our tongues just loose like that. It is destroying our a'mal. Nabi Sallallahu said, many a fasting person gets nothing from his fast except staying hungry and getting a voice like what I got now. Why? Because we're fasting and doing the physical process, but in the same manner, we are also lying and cheating and swearing and doing all the haram things with our tongues. فَلَيْسَ لِلَّهِ حَاجَةٌ. Allah doesn't need our fast. Allah doesn't need us that we stay hungry and stay dehydrated for so many hours of the day. It's an act that is going in vain. So understand that the physical motion of ibadah, the physical process of ibadah is one that leads to a higher outcome, a bigger objective. And one of the main ones is this. Another lesson we learn from the month of Ramadan, there are many others, and we can spend tons of time in just one. And that is at-takaful al-ijtima'i. Social welfare. Social welfare. How do we understand social welfare? Through the system and process of fasting? Through one of three things. Taftiru as-sa'imin. Feeding a fasting person. The feeding a fasting person is not only when there is no corona. Feeding a fasting person is whether there is corona or no corona. Whether there is fast feeding in the masjid or there is no feeding in the masjid. The masajid don't have feeding at the moment because of the coronavirus. Feeding a fasting person, look around the world. Look locally as well. Feed a fasting person whatever we can feed that person. Nabi Sallallahu said, who feeds a fasting person will be three things. Maghfiratun lidunubih.